Hello and welcome to Fowl Plays, where we look at tales of tabletop tragedy that are sure to ruffle some feathers. I'm your host BossGoose, and in today's story, we have a young player who is newer to D&D and joins a group with some older members. Things begin to get uncomfortable as one of the players takes an interest in OP and their character and insists upon having an in-game romance. And as the game continues, it crosses several lines that get progressively more toxic and creepy. Trigger warnings for sexual content and child grooming. Before we start to untangle that mess though, let's play a quick game of See You Later Gladiator, the rules of which are simple. I went ahead and entered us into a Coliseum tournament, and through a little luck, we've managed to make our way all the way to the finals, where our last opponent is waiting. All you need to do to secure our victory is choose the weapon that will give us an edge that we need to defeat them. The options are a Fire Flower, the Pow Hammer, or Soul Edge. So choose your weapon wisely and we'll do battle in 3, 2, 1. And if you pick the Pow Hammer as your weapon of choice, then congratulations! We were able to stun lock our opponent and pull off the victory. Our names will be synonymous with why that weapon is banned in all future events. Unfortunately, however, if you chose one of the other two, then the Fire Flower ran out of time and Soul Edge was too heavy to carry, and so we'll have to be satisfied with second place. Don't worry though, the new champion has graciously decided to allow you to hit his subscribe button, which will give you updates whenever new content is available on my channel and easy access to existing stories that'll keep you entertained while you recover from that battle. Now, without any further delays, it's time to take your seats and wet your beaks as we dive on into today's tale. I've been lurking here for a while and decided that my stories are worthy of posting, so I hope you guys can find some entertainment in this one because I have a lot more stories from this group that I could share. I'll try to keep it as short as I can, but it's a complicated tale. So the cast: me, non-binary, playing a small village pure and naive pacifist warlock. Funky things with DM magic, she can switch between human and tiefling, named Ensley. Matt, male, playing an arena gladiator fire ganassi named Ignis. Creed, male, who played a depressed air ganassi in the campaign and is a good friend of mine who was there for all of it. There's a lot to this story and other shitty things that happened during the time this took place, but I'll be focusing on one specific part of the whole thing. So, I switched characters a few sessions into the campaign to Ensley, who is kind of your typical nice small town girl. At the time, I was 14 and just beginning to get really into D&D. The DM was my age and the rest of the players were adults, around 20 to 22. The campaign was taking place during a revolution, which we were helping with. My character, Ensley, was kind of just tossed into the situation and was not at all prepared for some of the horrors we saw. So she was kind of just trying to stay sane and cope with being a pacifist in the middle of a war zone, trying to be kind and as understanding as possible to everyone while not condoning the killing. Matt decided that his character, Ignis, the arena gladiator and the most brutal of them all, was in love with my character. Which is fine on its own. I think that inter-party relationships probably can be done well, and characters with significant others certainly can be played well and add a lot to the story. I've had it happen with my character and an NPC in a different campaign. However, I was 14. He was 21, 22, and at the time, I was just figuring out that I was, and am, indeed very asexual and aromantic, and very clueless, of course. He knew about this, and knew at the least that I was a minor on the younger end. I didn't intend to get into any even romantic relationships with this character, and hadn't even thought about the possibility really. He decided, however, to play his character in the relationship, which I didn't even think to say no to because the character I was playing was super sweet and probably would be open to it, but also I didn't want to reject him and derail the whole campaign because it would have, as extremely protective and possessive and jealous to the point where interacting with other party members and having other friends made him extremely depressed and suicidal. He was very insistent on the relationship and spent a lot of time thinking and talking to me about it, which at first I was all for because I thought it was, hey ho, me making friends and making some sweet character connections, and it was a sweet relationship in a lot of ways, and I wanted this guy to like me because he didn't like a lot of people, but was also the big D&D person in our group, and so I wanted him to like me, of course. He was so insistent that we would have in-character roleplay after session for literal hours. It went on for 3 hours after session at one point, just them cuddling and talking at first, discussing different things. Usually the DM would stay in the DM talk with us for a bit before heading off to bed. But as time went on, Matt convinced me to ask the DM not to be in there with us at all because it felt weird and made the RP more awkward, which at the time I didn't realize was such a red flag and agreed with. We are diving pretty deep into creepy territory here. As time went on, his character got more possessive and unstable, and we talked about it very often, almost exclusively for a while. He ended up saying that his character would want to go down on mine. She was 17, he was 23 in game, I think. But that doesn't matter because OP is just a kid here. Gross, man. The actual quote from the text he sent me before the session: "Also, for the sake of clarification, Ignis does not have his advances well thought out, and he isn't really hoping for anything penetrative. He has thought out that he wants to go down on her, but that's about it, and anything else is really just in the moment. Just saying so you can have a better idea of what exactly Ensley would be reacting to if she let him continue after neck kissing." Oh man. I had to Google the term because I didn't even know what it meant at the time. So I awkwardly was like, haha, okay, I mean, I'm sure she's probably willing, but let's fade to black, and then moved on. This kind of stuff continued for a long time, with him discussing what his character would want to do, and me Googling things and trying to figure out what a normal, not asexual person would do in that situation. I called on Creed, my friend. He was in the campaign as well, but didn't know the full extent of what was happening, for help with a lot of things because I had no idea what to do. And he worked through it with me while keeping it as appropriate as he could and reaffirming that I in no way had to go through with anything that I didn't want to do. One of the last sessions before the campaign abruptly ended included Ensley, me, taking on a personal challenge of hers on her own, asking Ignis, Matt, to stay in the hall, and then having a panic attack over it later, which resulted in Ignis almost killing himself, and the player actually describing the character putting an unloaded gun in his mouth and imagining it going off, because he felt left out and unwanted because Ensley didn't want him seeing her having a panic attack / wanted to overcome this challenge on her own. Now, after all that, the kicker is that months down the line when the group had fallen apart and neither Creed nor I were in contact with Matt, ending on bad terms, we had someone who used to play with the group contact us again after Matt had kicked him out of all the current D&D things he was running. The person told us that Matt had been calling Creed a pedophile to everyone they met and talked to, presumably because he and I were good friends and spent a lot of time in calls together. Something that Matt and I also did, but Creed never did any of the explicitly sexual and boundary-crossing things, of course. Which, quite frankly, was angering in how first incorrect and secondly hypocritical of him that was. Not to mention how offensive to tell people while neither Creed nor I had any way of knowing / defending himself. Also, Matt had a girlfriend during this whole ordeal, who he wouldn't actually talk about any of this to because she would get jealous and have issues with it. As she should, this is terrible. So yeah, that's the gist of that story about Matt and that D&D group. I'm now with much better players and having much more fun, but let me know if you want to hear more from that group time because boy howdy is there a lot. Ew, I feel gross after that one. I'm just glad that OP managed to get out of this situation before things got even worse. In-game relationships can be tricky, but they aren't inherently a bad thing. But when you're playing with a large age gap between players, I mean, do I really have to say it? Going after the 14-year-old is creepy at best. Now, in a scenario where maybe the younger player wanted the relationship for their character, and it was PG, holding hands and cute pet names and all butterflies and rainbows, then sure, nothing wrong with that. In character. This whole situation, though, was just too much. First off, the motivation for this romance doesn't seem to have anything to do with the characters themselves, as she was literally just introduced and they knew nothing about her. So it sounds like Matt was more interested in OP, which makes me wince just saying it. Ugh. Now, if the initiation was the extent of the weirdness and the rest of it was just PG in-game stuff, then sure, I'd be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt here. But then we get to the after-session talks, and then asking the DM to leave so they could talk for hours in private. There's just no real good reason for this, especially with the content those discussions started having. And OP was so young, they didn't even know what half the stuff Matt was talking about meant. That is a huge indication that you should not be talking about that topic with someone that age. Now, maybe Matt didn't know that OP didn't know, but he sure knew that OP was 14, so that's end of story. You don't tell a 14-year-old you want to go down on them. Like, this is common sense, right? I'm not crazy. Now, I could probably go on more about this, but damn if I really don't want to, because the motives here are just disturbing and gross. Grooming is not a joking matter, and it's all too common, and the early stages of isolation and suggestion were already being planted here. So moving on, of course, what horror story wouldn't be complete without the problem player not learning a thing and accusing others of doing exactly what they themselves were. This whole thing going around telling everyone that Creed was a pedophile and stuff just screams projection and eliminates any doubt in my mind what kind of person Matt was. I do wish, however, that Creed had intervened earlier. I don't know how much he actually knew about what was going on, but as another adult at the table, if he had caught on at all to what Matt was doing, then he should have took action to protect the minor much sooner. At least OP was able to move on from this incident and has found new people that they're able to share their love of the hobby with, and I really hope that they never have to cross paths with Matt again. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video and sticking around till the end. I hope you enjoyed it. I upload new content every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, so make sure you check out my channel for more D&D stories. And if you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave me a goosebump in the comments below. Your feedback and support is greatly appreciated. But until next time, be good players.